Hey everyone, how is everyone today? If you wouldn't mind muting your microphones and cameras, please, before we start. Well, we've got a few latecomers joining, so we usually start on time, but most of them never arrive on time. So. Okay, cool. How is everyone doing today? Where are you all tuning in from? If you could type in the chat box, we would love to know. I'm currently speaking from Singapore, and Thierry is waving his flag in Brussels. We'll probably get some latecomers, but I think we should get started. Let me just share my screen with you. Okay, can you guys see my screen? Yeah. Yes. Cool. Okay, cool. Well, good morning, afternoon, or evening for some of you, wherever you are in the world. I'm Carmen, and I'm the founder of Another Startup Story, and I'm, like I said before, currently speaking from Singapore. Thank you for joining us on the 4th episode of this 6-part webinar series. Like I said, for those of you just joined, if I can please kindly ask you to mute your microphones and videos. So, first of all, I'd like to give you a brief introduction on Another Startup Story. So, we started out as an online magazine for entrepreneurs, freelancers, and creatives. And since then, we've ran many events and workshops across Europe and Asia. And we now also have a podcast. And most of our content spans across the topics and intersection of creativity, entrepreneurship, branding, and leadership. And we also work with startups and established businesses on a consultancy basis, alongside offering one-on-one business coaching for individuals. And my personal background began in a very kind of corporate professional services firm when I was training to become a chartered accountant. After qualifying, I realized I actually belonged in the creative environment, but I was faced with a dilemma because I didn't want to waste away the last 3 years of studying and working, and obviously not to mention your salary being doubled after qualifying. So I then chose to work for a global advertising agency, working as the financial controller. And in this scenario, I had the best of both worlds. So I was using my experience, but also I was working in an industry which really inspired me. So for those of you who aren't from the finance industry, what this role meant was, you know, leading board meetings and assembling financial decks to present to the MDs and the CEO. And I was essentially working as a business partner to the MDs across various agencies within the network, across London, Amsterdam, and then subsequently Singapore. And it was actually in this role that I discovered this problem of creatives lacking in business acumen. And so I started coaching creatives on how to set rates and put together proposals. I then decided to start my own venture, which is what is known as Another Startup Story, trying to really bridge the gap between creativity and business. And now I coach clients, helping them to get their ideas off the ground in the most professional and profitable way. So before we get started on today's topic, a cornerstone of Another Startup Story is about being on the path to continuous growth and learning, which is why I wanted to put on this webinar series. So here's a quick snapshot of the upcoming webinars we have left. And the next topic will be on going freelance, which will be this Thursday. So please do sign up if you are interested in any of the other topics. And before we begin, I'd like to let you know that we'll be opening up a Q&A to you guys if you have any questions for Thierry or myself for the last 15 minutes. So please save any great questions you have to the end. And you can say hi on camera, unmute your phones, or if you're shy, just pop them in the chat box. Yeah, let's begin. So what is branding? So I've recently been reading this book, Zag, by Marty Neumeier, and he says that, this is the book in case anyone wants to read it. He says that branding is a person's gut feeling about a product, service, or company. And I'm unsure of the level of each of your understandings of what branding is and what your experience is, but I think we can all agree that there's so much complexity and richness that goes into this word. We know that good design and branding is positively correlated to business success. And to back this up, McKinsey & Co. actually conducted a full research piece on the relationship of these two factors. And you can see here, the results showed that good design had a greater impact on revenue growth. So this obviously begs the question of what is branding and what is the importance of brand strategy, which is why I've decided to invite a very special guest and a good friend of mine, Thierry, to help answer this question. And so a recent study shows that 65% of people said that brands all look alike, and 72% say brands are totally predictable. Many brands today across sectors and across globes blindly follow the tech trend and are starting to look quite identical. And so Thierry names this new phenomenon blanding, which he'll be able to share in a bit more detail further on. But basically, this is branding not designed to stand out, but to blend in. And he'll explain why this is happening and why brands should really do something about it if they want to stand out in the future. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to Thierry Brunfaut. So he is the creative director and co-founder of Base Design, which is an international network of branding studios based in Brussels, New York, Geneva, and Melbourne. He's also the author of the renowned 5-Minute Poster series, and he's a professor and a regular speaker at design and branding conferences around the world. And just to clarify, the last point was something that Thierry called out himself. It wasn't me saying that he's resembling Kermit the Frog. Yeah, over to you, Thierry. How are you doing today? I think you might have muted yourself. So just.
I'm good. I'm excellent. Thank you, Carmen.
Amazing. How's everything going in Brussels?
It's good. It's pretty rainy today. No, not that great, but for the rest, awesome at Base here.
Nice.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we'll pass on the mic to you. Let me check.
Okay.
Change.
All right.
Well, we've got people from tuning in from Barcelona, the UK, Amsterdam, Belgium, Berlin, Sri Lanka,
nice.
Moscow, Poland. Amazing.
Is it okay to share my screen now, Carmen? Is that fine?
I've made you host now, so feel free to share.
Okay. Let's open this document.
For those who have joined late, please let us know where you're from. Really interesting.
Okay. Can you see it well? Yeah? Okay. So yeah, it's going to be about 35-40 minutes of someone talking in English with a French accent. Okay. So hi, I'm Thierry. So I'm one of the founders and creative director of Base. So 4 studios: Brussels, Geneva, New York, and Melbourne. Approximately 60 people across the globe doing strategy, branding, and digital. These are some of our clients. We have an amazing portfolio working with both cultural institutions, brands, media companies, main foundation like Fondation Vuitton, Fondation Yves Saint Laurent, Fondation Cartier, museum like MoMA, Museum of Sex, it was a great assignment, the New York Times. But we continue to work as well with small brands as well as big brands, and we just started working since 8 months now with Apple, which is pretty amazing because we know the future of the Apple stores. We do. So, but continuing to work across all sectors, because we believe that everything that we can learn in one sector we can use it in another one, like working for an opera can lead us to have great ideas working with a media company, for example. Yes, we are about cultural impact. We believe that each great brand has a strong culture, and basically we help brands to earn influence and then keep it. And we believe that this culture has to be built from inside to get to a good brand. I'm also the author of the 5-minute poster that Carmen mentioned. This is one of them. The 5-minute poster are basically thoughts that I had during processes in my work and with my teams. And I thought I would share them. And since I'm a kind of a lazy guy, I designed them in 5 minutes and then throw them on the internet. So this is one of them, another one. And that's also part of our communication at Base. This is the party we did for the 20 years anniversary of Base, using this ready-to-read concept. And this is a picture of that party. We also designed bags with these posters. So this is an ongoing process at Base. So today, the topic of my talk would be branding. And actually, we're experiencing for the moment a branding paradox. And I will explain why. Approximately a year ago, I was working with the New York office, and I was in the subway. And I realized by traveling in the alleys and being in the subway that everything that I was seeing on the wall looked exactly the same. Like all these brands using the same kind of design, the same kind of background, the same kind of imagery. Everything was looking the same, same typography, same tones, no matter this is for a brand called Hims. And then I would see something for Glossier, it was looking exactly the same. Like this ocean of sameness was all around me in this. I was like, what is happening? What is that? And so I wrote an article about that I called Branding, the Branding Paradox. And I will talk about that because if you are running a brand, this is something you need to have in mind. Basically, branding, no, this is blending. And I wrote the article with my good friend, Tom Greenwood, basically saying blending is branding not designed to stand out at all, but to blend in. So a bit of an explanation. If you see these brands, what is their formula basically? They all do the same kind of things. The first thing they do is they come up with a made-up word name, and they have like trends. Like for example, they would use a very short and cool name like Wix or Pingy or these kind of names. They would probably use double vowels like use or Prufio. Probably use or a common name like call them butter or cheese or donuts, or even other calling them Oscar or Jane or Jack. Or they would find their name, like using like the same Spotify did it, Taxify, Parsify, like we have all these similar names across the board. They would use a very sensitive typeface to use that. No, they don't need the logo anymore. They're using just the typeface to name their brands. They all have a very friendly tone of voice. They're all talking the same. They would use probably very cheerful illustration and some vibrant colors. And for the moment, purple is very much there, and light green as well. So they'll all look pretty much like this. So that's surrounding us in the street, in the subway, as I told you, but also on your phone, on your computer, all looking the same. So blend is basically telling you this. I'm a very innovative tech design disruptive, direct to consumer online brand. I will probably have an app and I will change the world. Instagram me. So that's also the attitude and the way to behave is exactly the same across the board, no matter the sector. And that's a problem because actually one of the and I will get back to that, one of the objectives of branding is differentiation. So this is how they look now. So this is what we have around us. Where is Waldo? Waldo is everywhere because Waldo is looking the same everywhere. And what we can say is that across all this, a tremendous lack of personality. It's crazy on how everybody's copying everyone and doing basically the same thing. This is a quick interlude. This is for me to drink. Okay. So the question is, what happened? There are three reasons that I see. The first of all, first reason is what I call the Pinterest effect. All the people that are creating brands are using the same tools, no matter where they are, whether they are in Bolivia or Spain or Singapore or China, we all use the same tools, and one of them is Pinterest. So if you take an example here of a coffee joint in a city, you don't know where today, if you're in Paris, in New York, in London or Mexico, all these places are looking the same because we tend to decontextualize everything. No matter where you are, you take the same references, you look on Pinterest and it looks all the same. Another example, if you took, for example, co-working spaces on Pinterest, you have these all pages of reference pages of places looking exactly the same, no matter where you are. And I think it's very sad that is the absence of context, the absence of localness makes it all this bland. So that's a quick advice, 5-minute posters. If you want to free yourself on a creative site, so forget Pinterest. Just take your own camera, go out there and use the real stuff. The second effect is what I call the I want to be effect. And the I want to be effect is basically because of these guys. So everyone and brand founders, they have these guys in their head, the Googles, the Apple, the Spotify, the Airbnbs, and a lot of people are basically copying them. But we don't have to forget that they exist since 10, 15 or more years, and although they change now their look, they're so strong. Their product are the brand. They are in our life, so they don't need to differentiate by their look, design, or concept because the brand is the concept and is the product. And one of the key errors that a lot of new companies are doing is that they're mimicking these big guys, but without having the strengths and the concept that this main tech company has. The third effect is what I call the teenager effect. So if you look at a teenager, what do? Teenagers tend to dress all the same. And it's funny to see that these young brands, they behave like teenagers, basically. They dress all the same. They look at the others and say, oh, I want to look like that. I want to look like them. And so that's the problem, is that so they all look like the same again. So that's the third effect, the teenager effect. So apart from the virus, there's this epidemic in branding that is spreading. And if you look, for example, of in fashion, Burberry's changed their logotype a couple of months ago, and I think this message on Twitter was pretty funny. This guy saying, "I love the way Peter Saville purged the Burberry mark of everything superfluous, like personality, style, heritage, and visual appeal, and included only what was essential, like an explanation of where London is." I think this is a pity. We understand that, obviously, that for a reason of being like omni-channel and being able to behave on every platform, they had to change the logo. But to make it so neutral and so bland now is kind of sad. And if you see, if I continue in the fashion business, it is basically happening with all the different brands, and you've probably seen these changes in the last 2 years of all these brands redesigning their logo. But it's not only the logo, it's their way the way how they behave. Their website look the same. The words should look the same. So this is becoming a problem. We also have new brands like this Brandless that just these guys raised 50 million in funding and created this new brand called Brandless. So it's really using that trend. And this is a little clip from Brandless.
Dear Brandless, we got our first order today. My new go-to place for certified organic pantry items. Clean beauty supplies. Non-toxic cleaning supplies.
So many vegan options. And only $3?
I'm sold. Who says better has to cost more? That's why we eliminate the middlemen that make national brands more expensive and focused on making hundreds of awesome products at a fair price. Better everything for everyone, all for $3. Start building your Brandless box today and get $5 off your first order with code TAKE5.
So it's great because basically Brandless is totally a brand, but they're saying there's not a brand anymore. They also put the middleman in the thing, which is clever. But again, so this is kind of an example on how this trend is used even by this kind of brand. So the question for all of us as consumer is, have we reached the saturation point? When we see around us, there's so many brands and so many new brands. So if you are today creating a brand, the first question you should ask yourself is, do we need this? Do we need your product? Do we really need what you're doing? Because there's so many stuff around you. There's so many stuff on our phones, on our emails. I mean, I guess you're like me, like all this stuff that is coming in your mailbox with new emails and newsletter and stuff. I mean, a lot of people are fed up now. So there's room for new ways to do branding. So that's the key question. Do we really need more brands? So if you are running a brand, you better have personality and have a reason to be. So this is an example. It's a research that was a survey that was done a year ago about the perception of brands by broad audiences across all Europe. And the numbers are pretty interesting. 65% of the people said all brands look alike. 78% said say brands all sound alike. 72% say brands are predictable. 73% say brands play it safe. 80% believe that brand focus on sales over people and culture. So people are not stupid. They can see through things. They can see through brands. And I think these numbers shows that things can and should be done differently in terms of branding. Let's drink. So I will go now through a reminder. What is the purpose of branding? And I will summarize in a very two simple 2 points. The first point is obviously to sell your stuff that you need. So if you need shoes, you need to be able to find new shoes. If you need food, you need to find food. The second definer of branding is basically you need to differentiate from your competitors, and that's also essential. And that's where this new phenomenon of branding is really failing. You don't have to forget that the brand is just an interface between a product and a consumer. So it's basically a way for a consumer to understand what you stand for, what you're proposing, what you're selling. And that's the dialogue between a product and a consumer. The brand is in charge of that part of this dialogue. So yesterday, branding was easy, and I was summarizing that in that poster. When I started my work in branding, it was easy. It was basically picking a name, a typeface, a color, designing a logo, and branding was that easy. And there are still brands today that are as dumb as doing that. Like, for example, if you go in an airport and you want to rent a car, you would probably see this. And basically, what is different between Avis and Hertz and Europcar and Sixt? they're basically the same. They're just the only difference is the color. Do I prefer green over orange or yellow? And the service is the same. And this is the old-fashioned way to do branding. But I can tell you that I still cross a lot of people that are thinking that this is the only way to do it. But today it's way more complicated. And why? Because this is what we call the omni-channel brand experience. A brand today has to express in a 360 way, on social media, in spaces and stores, online stores, by voice, product, print media, advertising, mobile. Like, this is where and how, and this is very complicated for any brand to behave. So how does that work? It works basically like this. So there's no pattern. It's really what we call the brand story. What unifies all these elements is the brand story. So if we go on Google, what is a brand story? I think the last line is very telling. It's what they believe about you based on the signals your brand sends. So it's not what is on your website, it's what the people believe about your brand. We'll give you one example now. Let's imagine you want to buy a white t-shirt, and these are two great white t-shirts, but this one costs $9 and this one costs $90. And this is totally okay for everyone today, because this is an H&M white t-shirt and this one is a Prada. So what the difference is, it's you accept to pay basically 10 times the price, and I don't know, it's 10 times better quality, because the whole story that it attached to Prada makes that you agree with this difference of price. So that's the one explanation of how the brand story is extremely important for every brand, is what is the mental picture that happening in the head of the user or the consumer. So we need to understand that the brand feeling is not happening in your head, it's really in your belly. It's about emotion only. And I will get back to one of Carmen's initial quote at the beginning. But first, starting with this, we never have to understand, to forget that branding is not working for a brand. Branding is working for the perception of a brand. This is what I do every day. Is if this perception is right, is this understandable by the people, and does that create emotion? That brand story does create an emotion. So Martin Meyer said, a brand is a person's gut feeling about a product, service, and organization. He's really right with that. But it also said, a charismatic brand is any product, service, or organization for which people believe there's no substitute. And actually, every great brand has achieved that. Is there another Patagonia? I don't think so. Is there another Ferrari? I don't think so. So all these great brands have taken so many years to build that, this idea that there's no other brand like this one. And this is important because if you're leading a brand, you need to have that in your mind. You need to have that objective in your mind to create a brand that has no substitute. So at base, we believe that brands are like people. And really the analogy is how do you see a person as unique is through its personality and attitude. For example, how would you describe this guy? You don't know probably Vladimir Putin personally, but already you have a lot of adjectives that comes into your mind. And how would you describe this woman? Probably differently than Vladimir, okay? So this is how we feel personality and attitude towards people. And actually, it's working basically the same with brands. If I show you this as a Nike ad, you would have a lot of words coming into your mind. And as another black and white picture, this one, the Chanel one, and you have a totally other world that is coming into your mind when you think about Chanel. So we're talking about brand personality, and this is what I do every day with all of my clients. No matter is it a big, small, medium-sized brand, no matter the sector, is how to build this personality. There's an example of a brand with a strong personality. It's Veja. what did they do? For example, they did this. They decided to make no advertising. So Veja said that 70% of the cost of a normal sneaker brand is related to advertising. And they said, no, we don't want to spend that in advertising. We want to use that working with local workers and eliminating all these things to make a better product. That is a first example of a brand that has a strong personality. Another brand that has a strong personality and since a long time is Volvo. If we ask people, what words do you relate to Volvo? I think more than 80% would answer safety. And if you see the new objective for 2020, for this year, is aiming to 0 people killed in a Volvo. And it makes total sense. I mean, the thing that is driving the whole company makes sense, and we believe them. This is a thing that we did for a cookie company that it's a client of ours in Brussels. We had the chance not only to design their brand, but even to design cookies for them. And we created the cookies that is in the center for St. Valentine with a man and a woman kissing. But we told them, hey, Maison d'Endroit, why don't we create 2 other cookies, 2 men kissing and 2 women kissing? And they were like, oh yes, let's do that, it's great. And this simple initiative and this simple decision to have these 3 cookies option had a great impact here in Belgium. A lot of people were talking about that, posting about that, really liking the brand of being so charming actually, and so nice on their way to see relationship and to see St. Valentine's, and not being so cheesy like any other brand. Yeah, another interlude. So the question is how to create an expressive brand, and this is what we're trying to do every day at Base. And we'll show you 3 examples, not too long. The first one is a school, a fashion school in Paris called Institut Français de la Mode. And this is a building, it's an amazing building along the Seine in the center of Paris. And basically the question is like, they were very strong in fashion business, also in technique, but they were adding a new department, totally new department in creation. So they would be the only fashion school in the world, but basically gathering all the people of the fashion business in the same school. They're also attached to all the maisons, like the Saint Laurent, the Dior, and all the big fashion houses. They were supported by them. And so we had to brand them because they were merging the 2 main schools, these 2, Institut Français de la Mode and École de la Chambre Syndicale. Was the school where both Lagerfeld and Yves Saint Laurent went. And they said, we need a new branding for our school. And basically our objective is to be the #1 fashion school in the world. So that was a pretty cool briefing. So what we did first of all, and that is extremely important, is we were not trying to work on positioning regarding other schools. You have to start from the inside. You have to start with the guts. And we're pretty tough in this initial workshop with our clients because we don't tolerate any bullshit. When we don't believe them, we just tell them. And it's really about building from inside. So we put together the people from the 2 schools together, and we elaborate the vision about the new school. We work obviously on post-it session, on the personality, how to define that personality. And then we come up with the strategy that basically was this, and that's another belief that we have at Base. Usually strategy are decks of 60 or 80 pages of strategy. I believe exactly the contrary. The strategy has to hold on 1 pager, because then it becomes a tool for everyone in the company. And this is what we did for them. So it's what we call the brand compass, with the mission, the promise, the difference, the experience. And this is really super important. And for example, it was funny that the difference, they were forgetting that they were located in Paris, and we told them, you're Paris, that's your difference. That makes you different from London or Tokyo or New York. You just to embrace Paris. Then we created the rest. with basically creating a typeface that is an old French typeface, but what makes French different are the accents. And so we make this kind of funky old school typefaces with this creative accents across everything. And by designing a new typeface, basically you're creating their voices and their new voice. And so from there, this is also was very new for them, is not only talking in French, but talking in English as well. So mixing the two languages. And so this is what we did. Some example of the posters. And then what was great is that we built all this with them. So then we asked the students to do the art direction, the shooting of all the imagery for the school. And this was done in collaboration with students. And that's great, because the more you do that internally, the more you have people internally that have ownership of the brand. The brand is not something that you apply from the outside. It has to start with the inside, and they have to own their own brand. So these are all shots that we did in the school. And then we mixed that up with also this idea of patrons, using this messaging, using the typeface across everything. And this idea of collage and mood boards that's inside the school. All what is digital was done as well, the website. And you see, it's basically a collage of these different elements that's totally open. And that's another point that is extremely important, is that everything you do has to be dynamic. A brand is not something that is fixed in time. It has to be evolved with time. And that was the launch of the new identity, and it was great. They were apparently in this picture, and they told me very happy with the work. Another example in a totally different sector, it's basically an elevator company, the leader in elevators in Beirut in Middle East. And you'll see that sometimes you have to embrace the most simple idea possible. So an elevator company, at the beginning I was like, oh, that's boring, right? What could I do for an elevator company? But then I met with the founder, and he had a wonderful discourse about his vision. He was basically saying, the future is going to be vertical. The cities are growing tremendously in the Middle East and in Africa. And basically, the travel of the future will not be horizontal anymore. It's going to be a vertical travel. Thierry, do you want to do that with me? And I was like, sure, that's awesome. So the brand that we created is totally simple. We just got back and proposed them this. So as you see, it's one typeface. And the brand is called Mitsulift, and it's basically simply a brand that goes up and down. That was just the idea, but we did everything using that idea. So you have all the corporate material, the brochures, we also created all the text content. This is inside the offices, the business cards, and of course now we also design the trucks, and it's across Beirut and all the cities where they're now located, and it's also a success, because it doesn't look like a usual corporate brand. It has also this twist. Whoops, sorry. This twist, and I think that's another element. A serious brand doesn't have to take itself seriously. I mean, every brand has to to bring some lightness to its identity and to its visuals and text. And finally, just a smaller job that I love a lot. It's in Antwerp, and here there were no strategy, no logo. We just decided to use poetry to do the brand. So the founders are Tim and Ilse, and it's a couple with their dog, and they bought a house in the center of Antwerp. And the idea was basically to have a restaurant on the first floor, a boutique, and a fashion store on the second floor, a gallery, and then the apartment on the top. And they asked us and they called us and they said, okay, we want you to invent a name and we want you to design a logo. And they were like very traditional in their approach. This is the garden of the house just behind. This is the restaurant. This is the fashion store, and this is the gallery, and this is the apartment that, by the way, if you go to Antwerp, it's a great place to stay. You can rent the apartment. And basically we told them, no logo. We just only use the address, Grandmarkt 13, and we proposed them that the whole identity would be only done by sentences that we write with them. They were just married, super in love, and a happy couple, and we were just writing with them. We just take session to write these sentences, and these sentences, these phrases would make the identity. So these are the shopping bags, and that's the chef of the restaurant, and everybody at Grandmarkt just played the game. So the chef invented new recipes and used herbs that he's cultivating himself, and so he invented this new dressing stuff. The website is also using the same concept. That's when you are in the restaurant. So we keep, and they are keeping and inventing new sentences as long as the brand evolves. And this has become a landmark in Antwerp. Everybody knows it now. These are some of the things that you can buy in the store. Then they open another store, a shoe store, and we continue to use that idea that's inside the store. And now they're even making products, and these like candles and perfumes and beauty products, and all these things are now in sale, not only at Grandmarkt, but also online, and also at Colette, for example, in Paris, and different places in the world. Digital, and this is super important. Again, is you always have to start with the people. You always have to start with the real stuff and the real stories. That's my light interlude. You have small water here. So final takeaways of this presentation. The first one is, no matter what, if you don't have a good product or a good service, forget it. So that's key. If you try to make a brand and your product is not good, actually perfect, it will not work. That's super important. So that's the initial focus if you start a brand. The second thing is, every great brand has a point of view. So if you think of brands you like, you will notice that they all have a point of view on the world. So if you're running a brand, this point of view has to be expressed and expressed very clearly. Third point, you have to embrace your difference. You have to make your brand 100% you. It's funny on how sometimes people are, for example, I'm asking, what is your main difficulty or main problem or the issue that you're facing? And I hate to answer these questions, but actually these questions can lead to great creative solutions. Sometimes your main limitation are the things to be embraced. So that's why when we start this session with our clients, it looks like almost like going to the shrink, to the psychologist, because we're really asking for everything, and we also really debugging the bullshit. And that's a problem mainly we have with big corporations or big companies. There's so much bullshit told at every level, but most of all at board level, at the top level. And then you have stupid big sentences applied on the wall and the entrance, and everybody knows this bullshit. It doesn't work. We don't believe them. So that's you need to be believed. So you better go 100% you. Number 4, it's exactly what I was explaining. You have to embrace your defaults, your errors, your mistakes. You can't lie. You don't have to pretend to anything you're not. authenticity, a lot of brands and a lot of marketing director are thinking, oh, we are authentic and blah, blah, blah. And after 2 minutes, you can feel they're not really authentic. Getting to real authenticity takes bravery. It's not easy, but it's totally possible. And even more if you're a smaller brand where you can control that. Point number 5 is you should embrace the obvious. You remember the elevator brand that I showed you going up and down. It looks like too obvious, like stupid almost. It works so well. So you have to make it simple. You have to make it clear for everyone. My advice is if a brand or what you're doing, you show it to a 6-year-old kid and he understands it, you've done a good job. It has to be that simple. And finally, when you're doing your branding work, you don't have to wait. You don't have to wait to be perfect. You have to start and building and correct along the way. I have a lot of clients that are really afraid they want to be perfect before releasing their new brand, and that's not the right way to do. You really have to, because the world will not wait for you. You have to go and now with the digital tools and everything that we can use on an everyday basis, you can correct and you can make your brand evolve with time. So that's my last poster. Successful brands of the future care about people, not branding. And this is something I believe now more than ever. So say no to blending. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Thierry, for sharing that. I hope that was super insightful for all of you lot, and for you to take us through case studies of past clients that you've worked on really helps us to kind of apply those theoretical points to a real life scenario. Yeah, so now we'd actually really like to open up for Q&A. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat box, or you can happily unmute and remove and open your cameras and ask a question if you want to say hi. But if not, then feel free to just pop it into the chat box. But in the meantime, I had an interesting, the second point that you raised was around how every brand has to have a point of view. So I guess my question is, what is base design's point of view in that sense?
I expressed that in my presentation. There's basically 2 points of view. The first one is we really see brands similar to people. Brands are like people. That's the first point of view. It's like really always seeking for personality and attitude. The second one is really the fact that we're striving for cultural impact. And that doesn't mean that we only work for cultural brand like museum or operas. Of course, there's that. But if you look at every strong brand, it's a strong culture. It's a strong internal culture. So what is culture is basically all the stories that the people are telling about a brand. If I take, for example, again, a brand like, I don't know, Chanel or Nike or like the big brands, there's all immediately a point of view. All the things that Nike are doing now for Black Lives Matter, for example, is to have a point of view, and they're totally credible in that sense because they've been doing that since day one. And in that sense, the point of view is obvious, and that's how they get so many followers, because we believe them.
Yeah, so true. I think it's, I think with everything going on at the moment, it's been a real test to see how brands have really been communicating their point of view on that. And it's important to stay abreast of the news and everything. I'm getting lots of thank yous for you, Thierry, in the chat box. Not so many questions though, but I did have a few questions from people who had sent them in prior on Instagram. And whilst we wait for anyone else to post questions through, I will ask this one. So we have this one question, which is, when does strategy stop, and when does experimentation, trial and errors, etc. start?
What we call strategy at base it's more like a vision framework. It can be reviewed. So obviously when people are calling us, we're working on that strategy and this vision. And as I showed for the school, this brand compass. There can be also other tools, but the key question is how to align the people in the company, in the brand, on the same idea. And it has to be done together. It has to be a work that is gathering the key people. For example, we never work for a company if we cannot get to the person that decides. I would never work for a startup if I cannot talk to the founder. So this is extremely important. And then each one of them is using this strategy or this vision framework. But there's a couple of brands where we work with them since a couple of years. Since a brand is really a dynamic organism, we can review that every year, every 2 years. We can put another new questions on the table. Or, for example, with the pandemic lately, some brands immediately called us and say, "Oh, we need to review," and we review the strategy in function of the changing world around them.
Yeah, and I've even seen some other design agencies basically offering like emergency packages, you know, almost not necessarily rebranding, but like how to even make sure, because when you look at branding, there's obviously your communication, it's everything. It's like we all know, it's not just your logo. And so even understanding how to communicate all of these changes, and obviously COVID threw a massive spanner in the works. I think we just need to think beyond that, right?
Yeah, what happened, for example, with COVID with us is like we had, I think the first week, 3 of our clients calling us, what should we do in digital? They were like, we didn't know we were that late. And we were telling them that before, but suddenly it was like, shit, you know, so.
Speed up our game now. Yeah, that's a really interesting point. Can you share some insight into, you know, with your experience and knowledge on the digital landscape and how, what kind of 3 key points you think brands should be doing right now to make sure they are, you know, very much visible?
I think the first advice that we tell them is that not focus everything on digital, which may sound weird, but if you focus only on that, you have to see your brand as a 360 ecosystem. There are brands that are needed, obviously digital, but also very concrete items or printed items, or the physical space has to communicate as well. So it's really not to only focus on digital. What is important, as I showed in that slide, is that this brand story works across everything and makes sense across everything. Then the regarding digital itself, we obviously do digital strategy as well here, and again, it's way more than, oh, I need a cool website. It's how you make that brand story alive and across everything, using social media, using and having a special strategy. But it always has to start with authenticity in the people. A big problem, for example, a lot of brands that are calling us is they think they can produce content, relevant content, and they can't. So they ask us to do a website, and then they're ready, and then, oh, but no, I don't know how to shoot my picture, I don't know how to write my text. And so that we really accompany these people and these brands initially also to understand that it's work, that's an everyday work of feeding with information and content.
Yeah, no, it's so true. It looks like we have a couple of questions coming in. The first one is from AA, and they are saying, I'm not sure if it's a guy or girl, sorry. What do you do with your clients after the branding work is done? Do you help them with implementation, PR, advertising, events, and other strategies over the life of the client/brand, or only do pure branding and then hand them off to other execution agencies or partners?
It's a good question. It depends of the client, actually. One of our main objectives at Base is to put the client in autonomy. We don't want us to be to be obliged to continue to work with them and to sign contract and contract. We want them to rip them off and take them, you know, all the budget. So if they can implement, like the school, for example, we help them implementing by basically, hello? Sorry.
I think we've had a newcomer join.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, that was.
So basically, we train them. We train the team to use the new brand, and so for some clients, they have the people, the professional internally, so they can implement themselves. For other, we train them and we coach them, and maybe we do a follow up. For other, for example, PR or advertising, maybe we'll add external other collaborator or other agencies, and we are like the safeguard of the brand. So we always stay there to be sure that it's well implemented. The first year of implementation is extremely important, because if you miss your initial implementation, you lost the impact. So so it's really no matter what, it's extremely custom. It depends of every client, and we find the best solution to suit them.
Interesting. Thank you for that question, AA. So we've got a question in from Elena, which says, Thierry, again, thanks a lot for a speech. The question is, what inspires you? Or maybe there is something when you have a stuck in projects and lack of ideas. Writer's blockage.
Yeah. So what inspires me? Oh, that's a lot of things. Strangely enough, it's sometimes not at all what I see around in design or branding. I mean, I think one of the key and the essential point is to have, for example, we have in our team writers and journalists and people that worked in movies before, like they bringing other views. It's amazing. Or actually, sometimes you find an idea, or sometimes but you can never get dry of ideas. And the best solution is always to work with other people. Everything we do at Base is putting these different profiles together. And I can tell you, when you have a guy like a young programmer that is 22, a girl that is coming from a cinema background, and another guy that is a pure typographic designer, and an old guy like me in the same room, the music, the thing, how we work together is the references that we bring to the table will, no matter what, triggers idea. Another thing that I really love is I'm always, when we do this session, whether it's internal or external with the client, I'm always pushing people to express, say, or write or draw any stupid idea they have. The more stupid, even if they are like, oh, I don't dare to show this because it's too stupid. I'm like, no, you show your stupid idea, because one stupid idea plus another stupid idea can give a great idea. So it's really being totally open also in these processes. I love that.
No, it's so true. Next question is from Joel. Hi, Joel. He says, hi Thierry, what motivates you, and have there been any significant failures you've experienced?
Yes.
Personal question, and for anyone who's more interested in Thierry's personal journey, so we actually did an interview, I think, was it last year or the year before?
Yeah, last year.
It was last year, right? It's up on the podcast, so you can listen to that, and it delves a bit more deep into his personal journey and how, he got to where he is today. So if anyone wants to listen.
The question about failure is extremely interesting, because obviously we failed sometimes, and we will do probably in the future again. I think the most when you fail is basically because you, for example, you can get very excited by a project, but you forget to look at the person on the other side. And you have to trust your guts since the first meeting. Do I like this person? Do I feel right about this starting relationship? And the main failure we had in the past is when we were like, yeah, he's probably not a great guy. He's probably a lot about money. But the project could be great. That's right on. That's failure. Because if you don't have the right relationship and the right reason to start a project, and you kind of erase what could be problems since day one, you will run into problems. And we had in the past, and sometimes it still happens. Sometimes we get excited for the wrong reasons. Sometimes we actually, you have to ask all the right questions at the beginning. It's all about relationships. So if you care about the relationship since day one, if you dare to ask the right question in the very first meeting, if it's something I tell any potential new client, I ask them to be totally open and transparent. If they feel something is wrong, if they don't understand, and then you build a relationship that is immediately very based on trust. And if you have that, you can build a good work. Otherwise, it will run into trouble.
Yeah, I think that's the thing with business. It's very much trial and error. There's no right or wrong. And a lot of it is very intuitive and requires a good judgment. And sometimes we make wrong judgments about people and clients. You can't avoid that. We've got a couple of more questions coming in, and then we'll probably have to wrap up because we've just gone a bit over time. So we have one in from Anna who's saying, what's your advice for a freelancer brand strategy consultant who wants to work and collaborate with agencies to connect and get visibility? She also has another question which asks, is it better to be a 360 generalist agency or a more focused niche agency?
I don't have an answer to that. I mean, it's what you want to do with your life. I think we were never at base, never so much focused about do we want to be generalist or do we want to be a niche? Because as I said, we were not driven by position ourselves. We were driven by we want to do this way, and then we are probably niche. But the more niche you are and the more radical you are, the greater your clients are. I mean, it's crazy. Like I told you, we were called by Apple, and it's because they saw the work that we did in culture that they called us. So it's, you know, this, you don't always, there are reasons for that, but also you have to do what you have to do and do it 100% and then radically, and then you will attract the client you probably don't expect because of that. We've been through up and downs since 25 years at base, but this thing was always there. It's still alive, and now with all partners, we have new partners at the table that are bringing new ideas and new digital ideas, and all these things makes that my brand is also evolving with the people that are running it. So yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of questions here.
Yeah, we have, I think we'll probably only have time for one last question from Maxwell. Priscilla, some of your questions around sustainability. So that's like a massive topic we covered in last week's webinar. Purely, we talked a lot about greenwashing and how a brand should communicate, you know, from this, if they're claiming to be sustainable. And so there's a lot of insight. You can find the link. I can send that to you after because it should be up on YouTube. So I would suggest listening to that webinar. But the next question we had is from Maxwell. What is one key piece of advice you would give to someone running their own branding studio?
That's another talk that I can also
for another time.
But I did my company with I created my company when I still was at school. I never graduated, and the old partners, neither of us graduated. And when you do it with people you love, and when you attract people that you like, and not only for what they can do, but for their potential, I think that's the main advice. When for example, I hired a girl the other day, super young, no experience, but her attitude in the first meeting was just amazing. She was like just listening, asking the right question. She didn't have a lot in her portfolio, but everything sounds like an intelligent person, and a person that is open to listen and learn and has a personality that you can feel. That's how we build our teams at Base. And at the end of the day, when we could still travel, then going to New York and stuff, and when I was going to the others of my studios, that's the main pleasure of it. You enter a studio and you see all these people that are working, and we're working all together, and like, shit, we have all these people, all these studios, we have to take care of that and doing good work together. And it's such a pleasure. I never get bored of that. I love it so much. So that's the thing, it's the people.
Yeah, totally. All right, thank you so much for that question. Just going to share. So I'd just like to say thank you so much, Thierry, for joining us and sharing your insight and knowledge on the topic of branding. I hope you all found that super useful and you've learned something, and thanks for joining. If you wanted to connect with myself or Thierry, give feedback or discuss a particular project you had in mind, please feel free to reach out and say hi. And yeah, like I mentioned before, if you want to learn more about the concept of branding or soak in more of his wisdom and hear about his personal journey, we did record a podcast episode last year, and you can find it on the Another Startup Story podcast. And we'll also send the deck around to everyone who's registered, so you'll get that too. And we'll probably put the recording up as well, providing it's not too long. But okay, well, thanks everyone. Did you want to say any last words, Thierry?
No, I just wanted to thank you, Carmen. It's always a pleasure.
You're welcome. All right. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your evenings, days, and stay in touch. Thanks. Bye. Bye.